All right, so I was out here messing with the different format for the channel, and I forgot to hit record, and I was almost done when I noticed that I didn't push that little window up, so I didn't see the button that wasn't turned on. I wasn't planning on making a video today. I wasn't planning on making a video in the next week. There was just something compelling about what happened on Wednesday and the guy that bid it that made me question whether or not MillennialSteam should even be out here anymore, because there's a lot of rich people and very conservative people that don't like the things that I say. They don't like the fact that their workers are listening to someone that's telling them that they're screwed. They need you to stay positive. They need that toxic positivity to stay inside of your head 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so you can keep coming back to work. Because the second that the proletariat realizes that there are systemic problems and devices in the way of their success, then the proletariat starts to wonder why I have to live over here and they get to live over there. Because it's a system that doesn't have opportunity built into it. It's a system that requires that tens of millions of people just shut up, keep their heads down, and work as many hours as humanly possible. They've taken away the dignity of human life and turned you into a slave. No one in power wants to hear that the proletariat is feeling bad about not having anything, is feeling bad about having to work a $16 an hour job. And as I said to you guys last week, the only people working $16 an hour jobs are the people that are cornered by society, where you've been marginalized and you can't do any better. Regardless of where you go or how hard you try, if you're stuck at the bottom of the wages, you will be there for your entire life. I am an example of that person. I have worked for the minimum wage or a little more my entire adult life, ever since I was a teenager. And I know that I will never make enough money to do any better in my life. And that's the joke. That's why I do the channel, because it's a running gag that we're out here working as much as we can, but there's no chance of prosperity. And anyone who says that, anyone who comes out here and says these things, the guy that points out the sign that says any job is a good job, is a liar. Because you and I both know that there are jobs for us and then there are jobs for them. They don't really work jobs. They don't really get their hands dirty. It's the slaves that work while they're on their yachts in the Mediterranean. We're back here working like animals so that they can afford their privileged lives. The proletariat is required in order to be the mechanism of wealth building. But more and more people are waking up every morning, pulling out their pockets and realizing they're not making it. And that's why I'm here. Let's get into our first opening monologue here. So apparently you now need a six-figure salary to afford what they call a starter home. Imagine grinding 40, 50, 60 hours a week at some dead-end job only to learn you don't qualify for an entry-level house that your parents could easily afford on the minimum wage that used to cost as much as a used car. Capitalism really is the best comedy show, except the tickets cost your sanity, and the punchline is you're living with three roommates that you don't like, that you met on Craigslist, have questionable backgrounds, bring home friends in the middle of the night, and you know that weird smell at night isn't incense. I've been there. I've lived with that person. In the last condo that I had, whatever the girl that rented the room next to me was on, I imagine it was, I have no idea what substances she was on, but she ripped down her door in her room piece by piece. And this is a really small person. She literally took something, caused her to freak out, and she ripped her door down like some sort of sci-fi beast with claws. I remember when she finally had to leave the apartment, because in these places you don't sign leases. They're month to month. And if day two you don't have the money, the landlord's already taking your stuff out and putting it next to the dumpster. I've seen it dozens of times in my life. So I was walking out of my room, and luckily her dad was a carpenter, and he was just staring at me. And I was just like, you do realize your daughter's a freak, right? Like, no rational human being feels like they're so trapped in the room that they have to rip down part of the room in order to get out. But it happened. And those are the kinds of people that are out there on Craigslist looking for housing at the very bottom. That's why every time you wonder if you're going to get a normal roommate off of one of these roommate sites, you're not. And the reason for that is poor people typically have higher levels of mental problems from one simple reason: they're poor, they're financially unstable, and they're scared that tomorrow they're going to be on the street. Talking point number 2. We were told there's a housing shortage, but America's sitting on 15 million vacant homes. 15 million. That's not scarcity. That's hoarding on a national scale. The only shortage is in your paycheck and in landlords' ability to feel shame. So yesterday I was talking to a small business owner, and she didn't speak very good English at all. It's just her and her husband working in the same place. I've seen them working. They own a little shop in front of Walmart over on Elliott and Priest. And I was talking to this lady in her very broken English. She was trying to explain to me, how she felt about them working on Wednesday and how she has to work 7 days a week with her husband in order to keep the place open because the rent keeps going up, and how all the businesses around her have failed. And I thought to myself, even this person who has no grasp of the English language, came to this country, started up a tiny little shop the size of a donut shop, and she's trying to figure out why she has to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week in order to just keep the lights on. And you can see the fear in her face of not making enough money, because she was capable of understanding that, and she even used her hands. My money's right here, what I generate per month, and the rent is way up here. Every month that I have to make it up here to pay the rent on my small business is a month in which there's a potential to fail. And that potential to fail is within all of us. If you're not rich, if something happens to you, if you get sick, you can't start your car in the morning, your car has a couple of flat tires, you can't get to work. And once you can't get to work, your negative income starts to show. Like I'll use a perfect example. I stopped doing YouTube this week on Wednesday. You know what happened to my revenue? It crashed. It literally went to zero. Why? Because I wasn't showing up at work. As much as I do not like having to turn YouTube into my job, it is a job that requires donations, subscriptions, comments. It is a job that requires your input in order to keep me relevant. Because the system doesn't want people like me coming out here and saying things like this, but it requires people like you who are going to come here and listen to the last sane person on the internet, because there's something innately wrong out there in our society that no one wants to believe is real. And the next time you ask yourself why I have to live here, remember this channel. Talking point number 3. Families aren't building wealth. They're strip mining their own houses like coal just to buy groceries. They refinance, take out the cash, strap themselves with higher payments they can't afford. It's like eating your own arm to survive. Sure, it buys you time, but eventually you run out of limbs. That's how I feel about credit cards. This week I had to turn to the little tiny bits, the morsels left on all of my credit cards in order to be able to survive. And it's not pretty, people. My credit cards have declined several times within the past 3 days. And it's simply put, I'm making minimal payments on these cards because I can't afford to make higher payments on the credit cards. And I was hoping not to have to use them, but eventually you have to use them right down to the bottom. And I think that's a sure sign. When you don't have any credit on your credit cards, that's a sure sign to the banks that you're not good for it anymore. And that's what's coming down to homeowners, is that if you own a home, you're pretty strapped for cash. But if something happens to your house, let's say you have some plumbing problems, or a toilet goes out, or you have a minor fire in your house, and you've got to come up with thousands of dollars for repairs that need to be done right away, and you don't have it, there's someone ready with a predatory loan to come in and help you out. But what they're really doing is hastening the fact that you're going to get out of that house because you can't afford the house, let alone repair the house, let alone repay the loan that you needed to fix the house. It's almost a catch 22. You may be in a house, but you're one tragedy away from being out of it. And that's where we're all at in this country right now. We can't afford to go to work at these wages. We can't afford to work anymore because these aren't jobs. These are wealth extraction services designed to extract resources from poor people and funnel it up back to the top in the most precision way that they can by ensuring that no one is able to somehow circumvent the system. Imagine giant metal gates with that are electrified, that are patrolled by, I don't know, dragons. There's no way in there. And rich people have always wanted to keep that barrier between the poors and them. The pros can look at what it looks like on the other side of those gates by looking at social media and pretending that someday they will win the lottery. But the reality is they need you working. They need you to stay exhausted. They need you to keep looking down while your body continues to work. And the only way that you continue to work is one way. You need food to continue being alive. And no one's going to give you free food. No one's going to give you universal basic rent. No one wants to give you universal basic health care. They want to give you some sort of bastardized version of healthcare that we have in this country that doesn't work. And we know it doesn't work because we all tried to use it and wondered why we end up with these enormous medical bills, even though we have so-called medical insurance. Universal basic income would alleviate the strain for tens of millions of people who can't afford to get sick. All right, let's get into our final talking point here. Here's the truth. If it takes $126,000 to buy an entry-level house, the American dream has already been evicted. We're not climbing the ladder anymore. We're running on a treadmill. Someone set on fire. And when more than half the country can't afford a roof over their head, that's not a market correction. That's society correcting itself into collapse. So ask yourself, are we really broke or is the system just robbing us blind with a smile? Either way, welcome to the open house of the apocalypse. Wow. Something I took out of there that was very poignant to me was you're already broke. And that's what we feel at the end of every single paycheck. Every single McPaycheck seems a little light. The buying power of what we're getting at $16 an hour seems a bit phony because we know what everything costs. We know what we need to be making, and yet the corporation hands you a McPaycheck. And when you look sad, they turn around and with the other hand, they give you a McDonald's Happy Meal toy. You go home for 2 days, you work your second and third job, you come back Monday morning, and it all starts all over. That seems like a pretty dystopian way of living. In fact, the reason why I've kept my head down in the last few weeks is just such a large amount of depression living like this. Week after week after week, endless weeks of work just to have nothing. No vacations, no savings, no friends, no family. And you just look around at what you have. I mean, I don't have anything. I might as well live in an empty room with a chair and a computer screen. And I look in my kitchen, there's nothing to eat. There's a cutting board, some water. That's it. This is America. We don't have things. We don't look forward to doing anything. All we do is wait for work to start. And it's not just 8 to 5 anymore. Most of you who are listening to this right now aren't working 8 to 5 anymore. 8 to 5 is a relic of an olden time where you could actually buy a home while working at a Radio Shack and own a little bit of a car, have at least a couple weeks of vacation where you actually go somewhere. Not like my vacations where I just sit here in my living room and I wait for them to call me in while I'm supposed to be on vacation. And what do? Well, you go into work because the next time you come into work and you didn't answer your phone when they call you, they're going to tell you you're not a team player. I've had that thrown in my face 100 times throughout my working career. You're not a team player because you don't want to come in and work shifts while you're on vacation. It happens all the time in retail because of the high turnover. And one other thing that I wanted to mention before I end today's video is the amount of, what do you call this? How do I want to put this? Shoplifting in the grocery stores among middle class people. In fact, this is a couple months ago, but there was a couple sitting out in their car and they called up this guy, gave him a shopping list. He went inside the store. He shoplifted everything this middle-class couple asked him to shoplift. And they handed him, I think, like $40 for like $150 for a grocery cart full of food that he just shoplifted. And what's funny is that I passed him on the way home because I was riding my bike. This is how I knew this was going down. And he was laughing about how easy it was to make money off people like this. People that probably have kids at home and can't afford their grocery store bills. There's a lot of people, and I'm not going to say include myself in this, but everything that they buy in the produce aisle is weighed at the banana code, which I think is 4011. I might be wrong. It's been a while since I've used a cash register. But you just type in bananas and you weigh everything at banana prices because they're one of the cheapest things that you can buy. And most of the time, the cashier is not paying attention because do you believe for a second that someone that's making $14.75 cares about what they're doing? No. They stand there because they have to. In fact, yesterday I waved at the cashier as I helped myself to some complimentary beer. Why? Because I know she knows that I don't care, and she doesn't care because instead of paying attention at the self-checkout, she's hanging out with her friends or scrolling on her phone. And this disconnect between caring about work and not caring about work is frightening because I've been out with people and they're like, you know what? I don't think I'm paying for this today. In fact, it was like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I was at the mall with someone and she just grabbed what she wanted, put it in her purse, and we walked right on out like if it were normal. So when the rules in our society, right? The social contract we have with our leadership, with the people in charge starts to break down because it's not working for us. The social contract only works when your dollars work for you. But when they start handing out monopoly money and you're going out and your debit card's getting declined regularly, or when you have to close your eyes before you swipe your card, because you don't know if you're going to have enough today, and you don't want to check your bank account because you don't want to have a massive panic attack, people are turning to alternative behavior in order to be able to survive because no one out here is thriving anymore.